Hello, let's talk about how to write a 10-minute play. Now, the first thing you need to know about a 10-minute play is that everything that makes a full-length play good is still the same for a 10-minute play. It's just that a 10-minute play is shorter. And there are specific guidelines that help make a 10-minute play work, which we're going to go over. However, first thing you need to know is if you do not know the basics of what makes plays function, please watch my script analysis lecture. It talks about the components of a play and just the basic building blocks of a play. So this, what you're looking at here, is slides from that video, but basically a play needs a beginning, you need a situation, which is called the stasis. Then you need an inciting incident, which is something that sets everything in motion, which is an inciting incident is a complication. Then you need a series of complications, and then you need the climax, which is the most important complication, and then you get a new stasis. So I will be if you don't have access to my script analysis lecture, let me know, and I will get that to you. So, all right, what makes a 10-minute play work? Now this is, I put off recording this little tutorial because I was like, how am I going to do this? So this is kind of stream of consciousness maybe, but here you go. So other than just being a good story, a good play, and doing all the things that make good plays, here are some things to keep in mind when you are writing your 10-minute play. Number one, let me go. There are many, first of all, I strongly encourage you to simply Google how to write a 10-minute play. You will get lots of really interesting stuff. A 10-minute play is an extremely popular genre in the theater these days because these people right here, the Actors Theater of Louisville, very well respected regional theater, very well known for their actor training programs, and most importantly for all the work they do with playwrights in fostering new plays. Well, they have a 10-minute play competition, and it has become extremely popular. They put out a collection of plays every year from their annual festival. So because of the Actors Theater of Louisville, the 10-minute play is this huge thing these days. And they're cool. They have many advantages. But simply Google it and you'll find some cool stuff. This one, How to Write a 10-Minute Play, is a website with, and if you scroll around it, you see many 10-minute plays. 10minuteplays.com. Some of you are familiar with this because you've been there for my acting classes. I may come back to this. The Playwrights Center of Minneapolis is a wonderful place. They've got this really interesting guide about 10-minute plays. What's really interesting is how to not screw up a 10-minute play. Gives you, or how to screw up a 10-minute play. Give you some things not to do. Just like every website, they're easy reads. Give it a look. It's worth looking at if you're really serious about writing one of these things. First thing I want to talk about is Google a skit versus a 10-minute play. A 10-minute play is not a skit, and a skit is not a 10-minute play. Even if the skit lasts 10 minutes, that doesn't make it a 10-minute play. Basically everything that I'm going to describe about what makes a 10-minute play work is answering the question, what makes it different from a skit? This is a weird thing that I stumbled across. It's like a forum discussion, but there's some interesting observations here. Not very recent, but but they basically say that a 10-minute play is not just an extended joke. It's something that says something important. Now don't think that means, oh, I have to be dealing with issues that are only political or things that are topical in the world today. No, something important happens in the play for the characters. And that's the very first thing on our little sheet here. This, I've completely ripped this off from a workshop that I went to at a theater conference. It was called the SCORE workshop, how to score with a 10-minute play, which is kind of a stupid title for it because the last one is an S, it's not an E, but anyway, and he even made fun of himself for doing that. The guy who taught the workshop. The little intro he gave in this workshop was simply, this needs to be 10 minutes, I hate that thing, this needs to be 10 minutes that change the characters' lives forever. Playwrights don't write about everyday situations. Those are, I don't know who does that. Nobody writes about that. The important moments in people's lives. That's what you need to be writing about. So it needs to be 10 minutes that change these characters' lives forever. Something big needs to happen for them. Their relationship changes, their understanding of themselves changes, their understanding of the world, whatever. Something important happens for these characters in their life. Along the way, we keep getting pieces that add to the puzzle. We need to be surprised, and things that we suspect need to be confirmed sometimes, and we need to have realizations. That's for us and for the characters. Like I said, I'm sprinkling many things all throughout this little discussion. A very technical thing is a 10-minute play should be about 10 pages long. And we'll talk about formatting in a bit. You get one page to set up the situation, a couple pages to complicate things, a couple of pages to complicate things, and then there's a resolution. So just like with the basics of all plays, all dramatic literature, you get a setup, you get complications, and then you get a resolution. You, as a playwright, need to be able to articulate exactly what those things are in your plays. If someone were to read your play and they were to ask you, oh, well, what are the complications along the way? You shouldn't go, you should be able to say, oh, this happens, and then this happens, and this is the climax. You need to know these things about your play. Structure is extremely important. You might feel like, I'm an artist, I'm just going to write what I feel like writing. Structure is the way for the audience to understand your play. Structure is not for you. Structure is not something that you are trying to achieve in your play. It's not, you might argue that it's not the story you're telling. However, structure is the way that the audience understands your play. Structure is for the audience. So don't be a selfish playwright. Have an intentional structure. Know what you are purposefully doing in terms of what happens next. So, score. Think about settings. In a traditional play, let's for the sake of argument, it's 2 hours long. A full-length play with an intermission. In a traditional play, you would have, you could take many pages to set up the play before the inciting incident really happens. The inciting incident being that one thing that happens that sets everything in motion. You should think of the inciting incident and the climax as the climax is the resolution of the inciting incident. Okay? So, listen to the script analysis lecture. However, you don't have that luxury in a 10-minute play. So, you have to take some shortcuts. One of the reasons that 10-minute plays tend to be arguably a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit more frivolous and not these sort of gut-wrenching tragedies or searing dramas is because we don't have time to get to know the characters well enough to care. And there's nothing worse than seeing a searing drama about people you don't care about. Characters next. Skipped ahead. Setting. It needs to be a place that is familiar. You don't have the luxury of a whole page to help identify where these people are for the audience. So think about where you're setting your play. It doesn't have to be boring, but it just has to be easily recognizable to the audience. Could be a kitchen, could be a spaceship. The sky's the limit. There are many different places that your audience is going to easily and quickly recognize. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to rely on design or a whole lot of money spent on a set to make this place recognizable. As a matter of fact, it shouldn't. If you're submitting this play for a competition, or if you're submitting it for a student festival, as most of you are probably listening to this for, there's not a lot of money for these things. 10-minute plays are popular because they're cheap. And so, number one, don't write a play that's very complicated, technically. I used to be the literary manager of a professional playwriting competition at a professional theater, and I read hundreds of plays every year. If I would pick up a play, and my example is, I picked up a play and it was set in a parking structure that had just collapsed and was throughout the play threatening to collapse even further. I didn't even read the whole play because I was like, there's no way we're going to be able to afford to produce this, so forget it. So think of technically, make them easy. But to get back to my point here, make sure that the setting is a place that is somewhere that you don't have to take a lot of explanation to do because you simply don't have the time. Characters. Again, the same principle. People that we can immediately feel comfortable knowing. It doesn't mean we like them. It just means we can. It doesn't take many pages to understand who they are. Doesn't mean they have to be simple stereotypes. You don't want them to be stereotypes. That makes it a skit. You want complicated characters. Always complex characters are the best. But make sure that they're people that we can easily understand quickly. We need to know them very quickly. Exposition tells us their previous experiences, which is great. We do want that, and you do have time for exposition. But make them recognizable. Make them somebody that doesn't take pages and pages to get to know. There needs to be a fulcrum of change for the characters. This isn't necessarily something you decide, like who they are. This is more a plot point, but there needs to be they change. A fulcrum, you know what a fulcrum is? It's like on a seesaw, it's that point, a teeter-totter, it's the point of rotation. There needs to be a point where things shift for these characters. That's plot, but it's also who they are. Every play must have an obstacle. Without conflict, it's not a play. So really make sure that your obstacles are clear. The conflicts can be complications, which are a plot device, things that happen that get in the way of what the characters want or are different than what the character expected. They can be internal conflicts. The character is conflicted within themselves, or they can be external. Weird things happen. Your wife comes home and tells you she wants a divorce. That's an external conflict. But you need to be able to articulate exactly what the obstacle is for all your characters, and especially your main character. There needs to be a resolution of some sort. It needs to end. I shouldn't even said or finish, because that sounds like the play just stops, but you can say that there is a completion to it. This is another difference between a 10-minute play and a skit. A skit just kind of stops. In a skit, the characters' lives are not changed. There's nothing important going on. In a play, there is a resolution. There is an ending. Something has changed. Something has happened. There was an arc. This is a term often used in terms of a character's arc. What is their journey? How do they change? Think about how an arc is shaped. They start from one point, they travel up through the arc, and then they come out to the other side of the arc. Life-changing and profound. That's a really good word to use to help articulate the difference in a skit and a 10-minute play. A 10-minute play there is something profound about it. It says something about what it means to be a human being living today. Even if you write a historical piece that's set in, the year 2000, the year, 1000, it says something about what it means to be human. Something profound about it. And skits are not profound. There is a realization at some point. Probably the characters have a realization, but it can also be, or it can be both, the characters and the audience has some sort of discovery that they make. Now the last one, which I don't know, Scorse, I don't know. It's not an E, but don't shy away from symbols or metaphors. But please don't hit us over the head with them. It is not a poem. This is a play. Things need to happen. You cannot ask actors to perform a metaphor. All they can do is play an action. Metaphors are not action. But you can include symbols and all those wonderful literary devices that we learned from English in your play. Now this, I didn't put it on here. This little summary is from a beautiful book who was written by a guy who was actually on my dissertation committee. A friend of mine is a very smart guy, really good playwright. This is from a book called The Perfect 10. I would try to look it up, but I won't take the time to do that right now. Written by a guy named Gary Garrison. I'm just going to add it right here. Great guy. He is used to be the head of playwriting at NYU. Used to be the head of the Dramatists Guild. Anyway, so here's what he says about the 10-minute plays. And he has produced his book called The Perfect 10. Tells you everything about not just writing, but also about producing 10-minute plays. So there's some repetition between this one and the other one because they're right. So create compelling characters in conflict. Again, yes, they need to be characters that we recognize fairly easily, but they need to be compelling. They need to be people we want to know more about. Again, doesn't mean we have to like them, but we have to want to understand them. There needs to be something about them that we want to know more about. You need to be able to identify and articulate what characters need, what they want, and what they desire. Every character needs something. This is why they do something. If the characters don't do something, it's not a play. Give them idiosyncratic behavior. They have to do things. Again, hitting you over the head with this. Your characters do things. Obviously, I don't mean just activities like moving furniture, but they are trying to achieve something they want, trying to overcome their obstacles. We need to know what's at stake and what they want within the first 2 pages. So, within the first 2 pages of your 10, at least by the end of the first 2, if by the end of the second page, if not sooner, we have to have a pretty darn good idea of what your characters want. We'll talk about number of characters. Well, let's do that now. Most 10-minute plays have pretty small casts. 2, 3 people. There are some that are longer, or some that are not longer, they're 10-minute plays. There are some that have more characters, but that's really tough. You don't have time to get to know that many people, and if we simply don't know them, we probably don't care about them. Before you add that third character, really think about how that changes the dynamic. Just think about sitting, sitting there having coffee with a friend of yours and chatting, how do things change when a third person shows up? Even if you both like that person a whole lot, things really change. The dynamic really changes. That can be a great thing. It can be a nice complication for your play to suddenly introduce a third person. But every single thing you do in your play needs to be very intentional. From what's your setting, what's your structure, what's the inciting incident, what's the point, and bringing in a third character. That's important too. I really encourage you to think very seriously if you're going to write a 10-minute play with more than 3 characters. It can be done, but just think very seriously about it. Think about starting the play in the middle. Now I want to flesh this out a little bit. In my script analysis lecture, I talk about the inciting incident, which is something that happens that sets everything in motion. I've already mentioned it a couple times in this discussion. It could be that in a 10-minute play, the inciting incident happened before the play started. If that is the case, there is still going to be something that probably feels like the inciting incident, something that is the most important complication that happens early on. But technically, if you want to get really technical with these terms, the inciting incident can happen before the play starts in a 10-minute play. It's probably not going to be too very long before it starts. The inciting incident probably was not a year ago, but something to keep in mind. So if you do start, and that would definitely be starting in the middle of the action, which can work for a 10-minute play. If you do choose to do that, though, you've got to fill in the gaps with exposition. Somehow you've got to let us know what has happened. The audience should have questions, and this keeps them engaged. So don't spoon feed everything to the audience ever. They should always want to play along. The good thing about the theater is that it keeps us guessing. We, as an audience member, get to participate by piecing things together, by staying constantly involved. You could call this suspense, but it's not that cheap. It's a desire. It's a questioning. It's a yearning on the part of the audience. There's always going to be a major dramatic question to a play. In a full-length play, maybe it changes from one question to another. In a 10-minute play, there's probably just one. What is the major dramatic question? What is the audience wanting to know? Why do they keep watching? They want to know, will she live through this? They want to know, will she escape? They want to know, fill in the blank. Here's what Gary says very clearly. Pages 1 to 2, you set up the conflict. You define the world that we're in. Even if it is a recognized world, it's probably not the exact world that we've ever been in, so you've got to define that world. Okay, it's a kitchen in the middle of a small town in Oregon, but still, there are some things that make it specific. First 2 pages, you introduce the central characters and make sure we understand what they want, need, desire. Okay. Pages 2 to 3, you illuminate the central conflict, which you should be able to articulate. You should be able to say, this is the central conflict of this play. You need to fully define the central dramatic, the major dramatic question in this pages 2 to 3. Pages 3 to 8, you simply complicate the story. 2 or 3 times. You certainly don't have more time than that in a 10-minute play. How do you complicate things? Adding characters, introducing new events. Things happen, which can be revealing new information. That is an event. Characters can have a change of heart, or they can change their mind. So that happens here. And then, guess what? In pages 9 to 10, you resolve it. Doesn't have to end happily ever after, but there is a resolution. Whatever this central conflict was that you defined up here, we know the resolution of it by the end of the play. So that's your structure right there. Dialogue. Should be interesting. Nobody speaks the same. You should be able to hand your play to somebody without the characters labeled, without the characters, it says Sally, blank, blank, this is what she says, without the character's name in it, and somebody should be able to tell when one character is speaking as compared to when another character is speaking. Ask yourself if you can do that. You don't have much time, so language, dialogue can be a wonderful shorthand to character development. Simply the way, somebody's saying, hey, let's go to the store versus want to go to the store. Those are two very different choices, and they say something very different about the person who says them. Think about the theater. This is not a movie. I know many of you would probably rather write screenplays than theatrical plays, but if you're writing a play, make it a play. That, incidentally, side note, that was another reason that when I was reading plays for the New Play Festival that I used to run, one reason I would throw a play aside if I was like, oh, this is so clearly a screenplay, that they've simply just labeled as a play. Be theatrical. Plays are theatrical. Keep in mind what you have at your disposal. There's sound, there's the movement of the actors, there's where do you expect the audience to be looking, and can be many different places at once because it's not a movie. Think about the set pieces you have at your disposal. A play is not a movie. Movies rely on visual. Movies actually have more to do with photography than they do with plays. So think about how your play is being told in one room, probably it's one room, without a whole bunch of visual stimuli. But you do have many things that you can rely on. Be very specific with everything. We only have a few minutes with these characters in this situation, and the more specific, the more we will get out of it. None of the characters should be stereotypes. None of the actions they take should be stereotypical or predictable. That is the worst thing that you can be, is predictable. Most importantly, for a 10-minute play, don't try to put in too much. Okay, down here it says this is not reality, it's a play, you can't put in everything. That's kind of the assumption that you're writing it based on something that happened in your life, or even just something that could have happened in the world. Plays don't have to have the same logic that the real world has. You have to speak in shorthand. You cannot put in everything. Another very important part about this one, which is not directly related to this furthering of this idea, don't try to put in too much. There are some topics that are just simply too big for a 10-minute play. I alluded to it before when I said, searing dramas and tragedies, we don't have time to get to know them to care. There are some stories that just need more time to be fleshed out and understood in order to be taken seriously. So make sure that your subject matter is appropriate for a 10-minute play situation. Doesn't mean it has to be trivial. It doesn't mean it has to be silly by any means, but some topics just don't work as well. Again, a location, as we talked about before. Please, not another park bench. But it can be an interesting place. Think about profanity. I cuss like a sailor, but there are some times where it is always a good idea to ask yourself, okay, if they couldn't swear, what would they say instead? It simply makes you a better writer. Now, having said that, sometimes fuck is just the right word. So it's your choice, it's your play, but always ask yourself, before just filling it up with profanity, how can I make these characters more expressive? Formatting is very important, and I will simply give you access to the right format of a play, and you should follow that. And I love this last one, his 10 bits. All these rules can be ignored, except for number 9. You have to format everything very carefully. A play is a work of art, as much as I hate that term. So, hey, sometimes these rules don't have to stick, but generally they do. Another very simple thing that I really want you to think about and that I really want you to answer for this is this simple little set of questions, sort of fill in the blank thing here. I got these from another playwright friend of mine. I believe in getting credit where credit is due, Arlene Hutton. She was the playwright in residence for the New Play Festival I ran for a couple years. She's a lovely woman, a good playwright. She's best known for her Last Train to Nibrock series. Letters to Sala is a great play. I actually directed the first reading of this play at my New Play Festival. Sea Rock City is the sequel to this. Anyway, she's a wonderful playwright. She has these simple little questions that she gives to playwrights. You need to be able to answer this. This is a play about blank. Maybe I should fill in blanks here, but anyway, you get it. This is a play about blank. It takes place blank. The main character wants blank, but obstacle, but what gets in their way of getting it? The story begins when what happens, and it ends when what happens. Things happen on stage. So up here, this is a play about, you can fill that in any way you want. This is a play about race, or this is a play about an extremely depressed heroin addict. You know, whatever you want to fill it there. It takes place here. We've talked about location. Where is it? It takes place in somewhere that's intriguing. The main character wants fill in the blank, but what's the conflict? What gets in the way of them getting what they want? The story begins when blank, and again, this is the inciting incident. It is always best to put it on stage, to have it be part of the plot, not just part of the whole story. Plot being exactly what we see on stage. But again, maybe something happened before the lights went up. And it ends when blank. Answering these questions really make you think intentionally about your play. Writing a play is not, oh, I'm going to write a poem and it's going to be about the wind. That's fine for a poem, but not for a play. Because you're giving this beautiful thing that you've written to other people and expecting them to put a great deal of time and effort into producing it. So, yeah, if you just Google anything about how to write a 10-minute play, you'll get some interesting stuff. That's one from Playwright Center. Let's look at what this one says. Some of this is review, but 10minuteplays.com says you don't have time for exposition. You got to jump straight into your story. Every detail must relate to the action of the play, what happens. You need to know what your play is about, and characters speak to get what they want. This is really important. This is a simple, this is something that I constantly have to say to young playwrights. Characters or people don't describe their feelings. They say things in order to get things. One of the basic sort of little sayings for a play, for a playwright, is to show me, don't tell me. Don't have your characters just talk about what they want. You have them do things. Characters speak to get what they want. They don't speak simply to let you know how they feel. So this goes off in a slightly different direction. All characters have dreams. These dreams make them unique. How are they, that's just sort of character development. But this is, what I'm talking about is more about crafting effective dialogue. Do not have your characters describe how they feel. Or they really shouldn't be describing anything. unless it's in an effort to get something that they want. Characters should be off balance in some way, as in life, perfect people are really boring. Your characters should have something going on with them, you know, like what's up with that? Here we go. Don't waste time talking about anything you can show. This says images are more powerful than words. I would change that to say actions are more powerful than words when you're talking about a play. Every great play has a point of no return. This is a huge idea. It's a complicated idea that we really don't have time to get into. But think about, is there a point in the plot where the climax is inevitable? Where there is no turning back for these characters? That really makes it interesting. And the rest of these things I will let you read. You can pause it here and read them yourself, or you can go to 10minuteplays.com. And there are some examples of 10-minute plays here. Some good, some not. So, you know, take the plays that are here with a grain of salt. What's this? That's the forum. Here is, I'll scroll up, well, you can see it there. DonnaHoke.com, she's a playwright. Here are, this is really interesting, 8 common problems with 10-minute plays. Go to this site, take a look at it. It's an easy read. See, she quotes Gary there. Maybe if I click on that, it'll take you to, yeah, good for her. She even gave you a link to buy the play. I wonder if she's getting a cut. So this is insightful sort of description of why 10-minute plays don't work. They take too long before they get going. The characters are just sort of mouthpiece for the playwright. Nothing happens. The play goes nowhere. It should not be longer than 10 minutes. Again, this one, the play is an elaborate setup for a punchline. That means it's a skit. One Trick Pony. The play tries to do too much. See, we're starting to repeat things here. There's no original idea in it. You know, your play should be original. It should be something cool. You're original. You're awesome. So make your play original and awesome too. So that, I'm going to just sort of stop here. We could talk about this forever, but we won't. So go write a play.